I'm waiting for him. Oh. Yeah, but it's the first meeting I've probably ever done.
We got the police one tomorrow.
Yes.
Probably the same thing's gonna happen.
Yeah, what's going to happen? But probably would have made it later. Remember? It rained. So, if I was passing the book.
Right.
But I sort of had, like, I was around.
Yeah, thank you, because I was
Try it.
I don't know why this is not.
Try it. The reason why is because you may have you may not have a very large one you should.
Yeah. Oh, well, not the learn.
What?
Not learn.
No. Just put in your HOH account.
Yeah.
Delaware and HOH school. Type it in and that learn will go away.
Oh.
Okay. Hello. I thought that was you behind the mask.
How's it going, Doug? How's it going? You gotta put another
Yeah.
Did you get my crazy text? I already had. I figured because you're you. Oh my gosh, it's really nice to see real people. I'll tell you. It's good to see them.
Next slide.
Do you want me to click it? I don't think it'll reach. I could try.
Get my packet.
I'm gonna talk fast, Patrick. 5 minutes. For real. Can I do it from here, you think? I can. Oh my God. Say hi. Such a relief. So glad.
Thank you for your patience.
No.
Oh, that's even perfect. Love it.
I just have to. Is your Chromebook plugged in?
Are we logging in through Zoom as well, Maureen? We're not.
You looking for plug?
We're not.
Yeah, just,
Mine doesn't have very good battery. You might.
Let's see, where's Patrick? Oh, Patrick.
I was just looking for an outlet.
Oh, I see.
Just in case.
Thanks, Patrick.
So Lauren, that camera up there is the live streaming. And then Patrick's also going to tape it in the event that you lose it, then we have it to put up tomorrow.
I don't know what I see.
Yeah, I'm always like the first thing that I'm like,
Laura, two things. Remind everybody, the microphones are live. The stream is
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you everyone for being patient. For those of you that are here in the high school auditorium, welcome. And for those of you that are viewing this on live stream, this is the public hearing that's beginning tonight for the Board of Education. Melissa Szymanski is going to give a brief presentation, and then we will have opportunity for the public to present any thoughts to the board when it's your turn to speak. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand and you can go up to the podium and state your name. And if you're a resident of Hastings, your comments will be limited to 3 minutes. And again, this particular comment period is just regarding the American Relief Funds, the federal funds, the $257,000 that have been discussed and presented to the board at 2 prior board meetings, and have again been discussed in a community-wide committee, and also through survey information that Ms. Szymanski will present to us briefly.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm here to take you through the plan for the disbursement of the American Rescue Plan Act funds. So I'd like to begin by sharing our consultation and collaboration process. On April 7th, we began a presentation to the Board of Education about the new ARP funding source. On the 25th, there was a presentation to the Board of Education around understanding the grant notifications and preliminary thinking for the disbursement. The 26th, immediately thereafter, there was an invitation to indicate interest in participating in a consultation and collaboration discussion. That was then followed by an interest survey, and the 28th was the due date. On June 2nd, we had a random selection of stakeholders. On the 4th was the input discussion. Immediately thereafter, there was an invitation to participate in an input survey that reflected some of the ideas discussed at the input discussion. The survey due date was a quick turnaround time due to the state deadline, and that was due on Sunday the 6th. And now we're here reviewing the survey data, the plan development, and this is the portion of our consultation and collaboration process. That's the public hearing. The finalization of the plan will happen on June 21st, and it's due to New York State on by July 1st. So our input discussion participants, that was included in the correspondences that have been sent out by the district, and I'm also including it again here, just for your viewing. And so there were a variety of different stakeholders that participated in the process. Wherever there was more than one entry in the interest survey for a stakeholder group, there was a random selection process using a random number generator, and that's how people were chosen. So the discussion process during the input discussion meeting, there you go, was as follows. So we began by setting the purpose of the meeting, and the purpose of the meeting was not a decision-making forum. It was strictly for input. So this was for input on the plan for disbursement of the ARP funds, and as President Berman noted, it's $257,000. We all introduced each other to create a welcoming environment, and then I shared a link to the allowable use of funds, which was also included in the form, in the survey form for input. After that, we set norms for discussion, and then I shared the district's preliminary thinking that had been previously introduced at a Board of Education meeting, and that was around a Hillside special education program review by inclusive schooling, an increase to the Hillside mathematics interventionist, an increase to the diversity and inclusion coordinator, and then an opportunity for input and discussion, both around those items and other things that people were thinking about. So the first item, Hillside Special Education Program Review by Inclusive Schooling, during the discussion was supported by most discussion participants. There was also, however, some conflicting feedback introduced around use of the ARP funds for this purpose. When we unpacked this further together, there was shared agreement of the need to understand opportunities for improving our program for students with behavioral and emotional support needs. To honor feedback received, we will be issuing an RFP, a request for proposal, to determine who will be conducting this review. We will be including other stakeholders in reviewing the proposals that come in, and this will be funded through increases to the 611 grant due to money not being used this year, and also a slight anticipated increase in the 611 funds for next year. This program review will occur, but American Rescue Plan funds will not be used for this purpose. With the second item, there was shared agreement that additional mathematics intervention, particularly early intervention, was supported. The third item was also supported by most discussion participants' comments with some variation. There were also some additional suggestions that were discussed. So I've grouped the first bundle of things by the overall heading, learning loss allocation possibilities, as 20% of our funds have to be allocated to learning loss. These items came up as possibilities suggested by the discussion group, and they do fall under that learning loss umbrella. And that's a learning loss program for students from economically insecure families, additional and or broader mathematics support, a summer program to address learning loss, a universal screener for students K through 8, and that's really to monitor and benchmark students academically and to get a sense of where they are as they're progressing through the system, and also support for MTSS. MTSS is the multi-tiered system of supports that's used to identify needs for students under both the academic umbrella and the social emotional umbrella, and then to provide targeted intervention to be able to support students and meet them where they are. Other suggestions that were made that did not fall under learning loss allocation possibilities were as follows: a social emotional learning screener, and also increased mental health and or social emotional resources. So you can see here through the input survey, there were 181 respondents to the survey. You can see the building breakdown here on this slide. Most respondents came from Hillside. Second was Farragut Middle School. And then on this next slide, you can actually see the disaggregated data based on, sorry, our clicker's slow.
think we all have this. Yeah, Ms. Samansky, do you want to, Ms. Samansky, in the interest of time, do you want to just reference the paper copy? Because we do have copies in the back.
There are paper copies in the back if anyone wants to.
Because I know we're getting
We're
close to
also looking
time.
to advance it without using it. Here we go.
Yes, and anyone viewing this at home, the slide presentation is on the board docs section of the district's website.
Perfect. And the next one? Thank you. It's not advancing, Patrick. Thank you. You can see the participant roles, and most of our respondents were parents. Thank you. So when we were looking at the input survey results, participants were asked to respond on a scale of 1 through 5, a Likert scale, with 1 being lowest priority and 5 being highest priority. So here you can see the breakdown of the responses that we received that were ranked 4 and 5 in terms of towards the highest priority. And I also included neutral so that you could see, both ends of the scale. So you can see that breakdown here. So also, we looked at the social emotional learning screener and increased mental health and/or social emotional resources that I referenced. So you can see the breakdown in the rankings here. And then on the next slide, you can see some priority levels for spending indicated in terms of results around those learning loss areas that were suggested by the discussion group. The comment themes that were recurring through the survey included mathematics support in the open-ended comment box, mental health and SEL programs, support in other academic content areas, broad reach of support across all demographic groups, professional learning, and supports for students with IEPs. And one of the comments that I would like to highlight was that there was a quote, "These all need to be high priority in our district. A community is only as strong as its most vulnerable. We need to be planning better to ensure early intervention, early support, and ongoing resources to strengthen our entire community." So on the next slide is our plan for disbursement of the ARP funds following the input we received and commensurate with the data that we have in terms of the needs of our learners throughout the system. Item 1 in the plan is an increase to mathematics interventionist at Hillside. And this is for 2 years, and the allocation would be $40,000. Item 2 in our plan, increase to the diversity and inclusion coordinator. It's K-12, 2 years, and the allocation is $90,000. Item 3, under the heading of learning loss, is this idea of bolstering MTSS. And that, again, is the multi-tiered system of supports that includes both academic and social emotional supports. Under this heading, we were able to incorporate a lot of the feedback that we received both in the survey and in the discussion context. So this notion of developing a social emotional learning mental health program development, like developing what we've got in those areas. And this would be inclusive of universal screeners, and that was, again, for benchmarking and following students over time, both academic and social emotional, and then direct intervention support, academic and social emotional. This would be inclusive of the suggestion of additional math support. It would be inclusive of programming for students from economically insecure families. This would be inclusive of support across content areas, which was also suggested in the comments, and it would be accessed by all of our vulnerable students, including students with IEPs, being able to access direct intervention based on needs determined through the MTSS process. So that is the plan, and thank you for coming to the hearing. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Melissa. So at this point, it's 7:16. We won't be stringent to 7:30 if all that are present would like to speak, because we would like to hear public comment based on the feedback of the presentation just provided. So if you would like to speak in reaction or in comment to the funding of $250,000, the ARP funds, at this point you can individually go up to the podium and state your name, and if you're a resident of Hastings, and then you will each have 3 minutes to speak. Board members can also participate later in the agenda. We'll have an opportunity to ask questions, provide feedback, but this time is for the public input. Hi, I'm Susie Caramonica. I am a parent. I have one child in each of the 3 schools. I guess first of all, just from a process perspective, you know, the survey that came out didn't have a lot of description for the things to vote on. And so just like from a statistics perspective, the data is only based on what you asked, and you know, you mentioned that most of the responses were from parents, but the parents are the largest number of the community. So I don't know. I feel like there's a little bit of fault in the process of data collection. Just wanted to start with that, but I was reading the FAQs yesterday about what this is for. So, you know, it's described as its intention is to reopen schools safely, to maximize in-person instructional time and address the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on students, educators, and families. So when I took the survey, I was trying to understand how some of those things directly affect our students, impact our students. And when I think about the experience of my children, you know, in 3rd grade, my youngest basically didn't really have school for the second half of, you know, went from March to the end of the school year of, what was that, 2019 or 20? I don't know. 20, yes. And then up until April this year, he had school till 8:30 to 10:45, and the afternoons were like a few 20-minute sessions. But like he's addicted to his screen now, and he's going into 5th grade. There's a high number of students, and you know, how, like, his experience, how does this address the loss that they've received over the last year and a half in, you know, going into school next year? And then similar, I have middle school, high school students. My middle one's going into high school. I mean, their math experience was horrible this year. In part, you know, no fault to the teachers, but they were absent so much, and the kids were on the screen so much, you know, between technical difficulties and just not being able to connect with like a concept because they're watching it over a screen. I mean, I see Hillside math intervention or math programming, and there was a broader mathematics support, but I mean, I just really want the funds to go to directly addressing the students. So I have a question about like putting $90,000 towards the diversity and inclusion coordinator. I don't understand how it's a great idea. We talked about it at the budget meeting. It didn't get included. I don't understand how that gets kind of stuffed into here. I don't understand why it directly improves the experience related to COVID-19 for our students. You know, I think that my personal opinion is that we need to focus on addressing the learning loss, really understanding what that is. I mean, I think teachers could probably address that directly by what they're seeing with their students, looking at grades, things like that. I don't know if we're looking at other data besides kind of having these discussions.
Thank you. It's been 3 minutes.
Okay. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Laura Compagni. I'm a parent, and I was included in Friday's forum. I appreciated the opportunity to be included, and I also appreciated the use of a survey so that we can get broader feedback from parents. I certainly don't see myself as a representative of parents. I'm one person, so I think I'm just representing myself. But I would like to reiterate one of the comments made at the very end of the forum on Friday by a faculty member from Hillside. A district faculty member reported to the group that some Hillside teachers are not in support of an expanded DEI position. I think the comment deserves more attention. I want to know why teachers feel that way. Does it have anything, this is a question, does it have anything to do with a shift in recent months and years away from programs that have a positive, multicultural progress theme? For example, Juneteenth, Indigenous Peoples Day, recognition of the Stonewall Uprising, toward programs that have a shame-oriented victim/oppressor theme. For example, asking 10-year-old children to place themselves on the white supremacy pyramid. I believe that we need to delve deeply into the thoughts, feelings, and insights of all teachers, all students, and all parents before expanding the district diversity program. I think that its core principles, the core principles of the program, the goals of the program, the themes of the program, and the messages should be child-centered. They should come from stakeholders from this community, teachers, parents, and students, not consultants or small groups of ideological activists. Teachers, parents, and students. Thank you.
My name is Doreen Bucher, and I'm a parent. I also should say that I'm going to be joining the BOE, but I'm representing myself as a parent tonight. I couldn't agree more with what Susie and Laura said, so thank you for helping me to limit my time up here, hopefully, although I have a lot of points. I agree that, when you look at what is requested and required of this money, which is an amazing opportunity for us, given the year that we just had. And you see that it says to address the impact of the pandemic on the students, as I believe Susie had said. And I'm not sure that we actually did that. I don't know how we came up with the original 3 ideas, but I think it's quite well known that the students' mental health around the globe and in our country has been dramatically impacted. I'm wondering if, when we got this money, if anyone approached Jocelyn or Julianne, and I'm sure there's someone in the high school, I just am not familiar with that person, to ask them what their opinion was to help our students, because coming back to school, I think, is going to be really hard for the 2 of them to face all of these students and all of the issues they have. So for us to not really prioritize the spending for that mental health, I can't even imagine why we're not doing it. The other part is that I think it's important is that for some of our students, we're going to be getting the results from the state tests in, I think it's the end of September, beginning of October. And that's really where the rubber's going to meet the road, right? We're really going to find out then how our students are doing, because what I've heard from students across the board is that grades are pretty much inflated this year. That they're given a pass, that they're not doing very well, they're given other grades. I don't think that anybody, I certainly as a parent don't really have any idea how my daughter is doing in school or my son. And again, to someone's point, I don't think that's necessarily the teacher's fault, it's the fact of where we've been in the pandemic. But I don't want us to find out in September that we are in such trouble because our kids did so poorly. We need to plan for that now. We have the opportunity to use the money now. Why don't we have the money, use some of the money to have a group of temp teachers? We can isolate the students, figure out who did well and what, because we're going to know ELA, math, and science, where they're going to do. We should have a cadre of people ready to help our students when we find out in October, because our parents are not going to be happy when they find out that their students didn't do well and that they didn't learn anything based on what the tests are. And then finally, I just have to say that, to the point of Laura, I don't see how this DEI position possibly addresses the impact of the pandemic on the students. And for us to try to shoehorn this into this budget where we have this opportunity for this money to help our students learning and to help their mental health is frankly unconscionable. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Alex Dalpiaz. I am a parent, soon-to-be board member. I just want to already touch on some of the things that were interesting to me, but I want to touch on something that happened in the meeting on Friday as well, which was one of the most important voices in the room when asked what their concern was, brought up that it was mental health, stress, and anxiety was a key in-school concern as coming back from the pandemic. And what happened next is that comment was sort of left, wasn't addressed. Those words were not brought up again for the rest of the meeting. And, my concern is that, this is something that we have to listen to. And, I've heard similar things from residents while I was running for board, that there were concerns about stress and anxiety, and that a lot of what the pandemic brought, that bill is sort of coming due now. I mean, I know of families who are moving. I know of children who have changed schools, who are going to change schools. I know of divorces. And I think the same way when this pandemic started, obviously we had no plan because we didn't know it was going to happen. And that put us on the back foot. And I think that in a broader sense, we owe it to the community to have a plan to exit the pandemic. So while I can have respect for all of these choices in different ways, I think that we might be fooling ourselves if we're not prepared that there are going to be consequences with children, with families, within the community. And if we're sort of saying that we figured out ahead of time what we want to spend money on, when we run into these difficulties next year, they're going to be more difficult to deal with and more difficult to handle. And so my admonition to the district and the board would be to spend a moment presuming what those things might be and try to get ahead of them for the benefit of everybody, because otherwise the sort of echo of the pandemic is going to stay with us for quite a while. So that's it. Thank you.
I'm Amanda Capillis. I have 2 kids at Hillside, a first grader and a third grader. And I'm just going to speak kind of more to what you had started off with, because I just kind of came across all of this information pretty much in the last Friday. It was kind of when I just started hearing about it, and it was because I was speaking with someone from SEPTA, because my child just happens to have special needs, and so we were in conversation about some things, and she had mentioned that there was going to be this survey that was going out, and I said, oh, it's a survey, and as a parent, there's been a lot of emails, and I know a lot of information comes in, and as I think a lot of us sometimes scroll through it and be like, okay, that's another email, and I feel like there was a lot of people who didn't even know that the survey had even been out there, and I tried, as soon as I figured it out, I tried to post it on parents, I tried to advocate as a parent and say, hey guys, look at this. But then there were so many people who had questions about what all this information was about. Like, what am I taking the survey for? What am I reading this for? And there wasn't a lot of description, so it seemed very, I'll answer the survey, but I don't really know the juice of why this is happening. And I think that communication to parents, especially parents that are don't have the time to always be coming to the board meetings or coming to the PTSA meetings or to the SEPTA meetings or all that. I think that it's a hard thing to keep up with, let alone kind of just spearing off of this year, right? This year has been very trying to all of us. There's no family that's not affected in any way, shape, or form. This has been a very hard year. So we're just finally getting back into school, into the swing of things, and this is a pretty important piece of a chunk of money that could be utilized in a very important way. And I just feel like a lot of parents didn't have that ability to really assess what the information was and how to really fill out the survey properly, or even know about the survey. And then there was even kind of question marks about tonight's meeting of like, oh wait, it's happening, where is it happening? Is it at 7 o'clock? Is it in person? Is it not in person? And I had to do some like serious digging on the website to come here tonight. I was like, okay, all right, 7 o'clock, all right, where is it? And it finally addressed it, but it was like very, like I had to actually take time to do it versus, and maybe there is a way, I don't know, maybe I missed something, which is very possible, very, very possible. But I think that this, moving forward, with something so big like this, maybe there could be some way of communicating it a little bit, not getting it shoved into separate things. And it was a separate email. I did go back and it was a separate email. But it's just something that, I don't know, maybe could have been triggered a little bit different.
We have passed the 7:30 time, but if there are other participants that would like to share their thoughts, we will continue providing the time.
My name is Caitlin Chang, and I'm scared. I'm hoping if I say that, it'll make it easier to talk. Thank you. Thank you to board. Thank you all for caring. Like, coming out and caring. It's so beautiful. I'm going to read. When considering how to best allocate the American Rescue Act funds, my first thought is fairness. Who or what groups have been most harmed by the pandemic? With this question in mind, I support the funds being used in the following ways. That's okay. Expanding the position of diversity and inclusion to 1.0, math interventionist, learning loss program, special education program reviews at Hillside. A small anecdote to illustrate why I support the expansion of the position of diversity and inclusion. A friend of mine who is of color mentioned to me recently that one of the things that they find so hard is never ever knowing when something negative related to their race might occur. I guessed that a similar, near constant tension might be present being in a religious minority, or in the minority in terms of sexual orientation or gender. I bring this up because I view having a full-time coordinator of diversity and inclusion as a way of telling our students, we get it. We acknowledge that at any moment of your school day, a sense of belonging could be fractured in relation to an essential part of your identity, and we will support you. All of our students will be dealing with so much tension and stress entering the next school year. But I think we need to consider the students who pre-COVID were already experiencing tension and stress. Thank you.
Hi, I'm nervous too. I'm Juliana Dalpiaz. I work at Hillside as a teacher's assistant. And of course, I'm also a parent. We have a middle schooler and a high schooler. To your point, and I respect that, we have many incidents at Hillside of children painting swastikas in the bathroom. Are we going to hire a coordinator just to tackle that? I think we have director of curriculum that I think is perfectly capable of doing research and using all the staff they already have in this small district to do the job, hands-on. I don't think we need another administrative position. It's just like we need to tackle the mental health, and I have examples like from school. Like for example, I work in first grade. I had this little girl which I helped when she was on the Zoom meetings. She was not coming to school. We heard that she was lively in kindergarten. Then she came to school in first grade, and she was at home. And we talked to her, help her with math, and we read together as well. And she would talk like this, with a pause. And it was just like, what? And so then she comes back and just like, little by little, start working with her again. And the mom was so grateful that I worked with her, just was like nothing. And this is like a tiny little example of just like, the kids being helped just by coming back to school. On the other hand, I had a very, 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 very bright kid that suddenly, is getting homeschooled. Never once he met his peers, never once. And he was so lovely, so bright. I think he could be like, 2 grades ahead already. And just like, and these are the things that I think we need to tackle. I don't consider myself racist. I think our town, it's not racist. I think things happen. I think just like kids, and this is always going to happen. They're going to draw swastikas. They're going to draw phallic symbols. They're going to be mean to their friends with whatever color they have. I was not born in this country. People talk to me just like, oh, when are you going to learn English? It's just like, and especially kids, they can be really mean. I think it's just like this becoming so political. It's just like this obsession, or it's just like, or just someone being black. I have black friends. I have a black uncle. I have black and dark people in my family. It's just like, we're just not
Your 3 minutes are up.
community. I'll finish in a second. So I highly resented my children being asked to put themselves in a white pyramid chart. I think it's just like, what about the damage that was done to them? Who's tackling that? You guys know that this community is not racist. We work together. We do things together. I'm working in school because I'm pretty much a volunteer. I was in school working for ages for free. My kids left Hillside and said, oh my God, it's an opportunity for me to continue trying to help.
Excuse me, can you please wrap it up?
Yes. So I would ask you kindly just to think about my words and my experience. Thank you.
We've exceeded the time that we originally allotted. However, there are only a few other community members in the room. And if you would like your opportunity to speak, the board would like to give you that opportunity. If I don't see anyone else coming up to the podium to speak, the public hearing is now closed. And the public portion of the Board of Education meeting is going to begin. We've already had a call to order at 6 p.m. We were in executive session and are now in our public session. Dr. Henning-Piedmont, are there any announcements?
Thank you very much, Ms. Berman. Just several announcements. First, I just want to remind parents who took their children to be vaccinated at Dobbs Ferry High School a couple of weeks ago that the second vaccination date is Wednesday, June 9th. That was in the letter. It's in the same location, so I hope that parents will remember, or that they have their reminders for that very important date. I'd also like to thank Maureen Caraballo, the technology team, and for Patrick, who's here. Patrick, could you wave? Who has done a really amazing job in making sure that our meetings are uploaded to our website. Tonight, we are using new technology. We're live streaming for the first time, and that's a pretty significant, sort of increase or improvement in the manners in which people who are not present in the audience can actually access this meeting. So thank you very much for making that possible. Melissa Delabrer, who's our district clerk, sent that link out so that people can see it. They don't have to wait until it's produced and then upload it to our website. So I want to make sure that everyone was aware of that. We are going to have to reconvene our building level school reopening teams because today, just in case, Friday wasn't bad enough with the mixed messages about mask or no mask. So the governor did come out later on today to indicate that he had had conversation with the CDC about relaxing the mask requirement for outdoors. And that would be up to the district. So the process that we will continue to abide by and honor would be to have the building level school reopening teams enlist feedback from their faculty and staff about allowing children to not have to wear their mask outside. Clearly, there's no change in the indoor mask policy. We'll also send out a survey, as we've done at every phase since we reopened in September, to enlist feedback from the community with that question of, do you agree with, or should we allow children to have their masks off outdoors? Mind you, we have 3 weeks of school left, and it's a very delicate, schools are very delicate ecological systems. For those of us who, have been here since last March and really kind of navigating every step of the way to make sure that we honor the safety and safety practices and protocols, we certainly don't want to do anything that's going to impact the ability for us to have our end-of-year celebrations. That's the moving up celebrations, including our, the kindergartners, the fifth graders, the fourth graders, the eighth graders, and our seniors. So we will, as I said, abide by that process, obtain feedback from faculty, staff, and parents, and let you know, bring that back, and we will have some kind of meeting probably leading up to, it probably has to be, if not the end of this week, next week, in order for us to make sure that we fulfill our obligation to enlist feedback. There are a few other announcements having to do with some meetings coming up. We believe in using the last few weeks to pack in as many things as we possibly can. Just to bring to your attention, on Wednesday of this week, there's the National Honor Society induction ceremony that's actually here in this location in the auditorium starting at 4 o'clock. The Hastings High School Broadway Review is Friday, June 11th starting at 7 p.m. The Grit Ninja for 5th grade is Tuesday next week, the 15th. The High School Science Symposium, which is very exciting, is Tuesday, June 15th, starting at 7 p.m. It's located in the playground stage area. The Farragut Virtual Career Fair will be Wednesday next week, June 16th, starting at 1:15 p.m. The Policy Committee meeting will be Wednesday next week, June 16th, starting at 3 p.m. The Hillside 4th grade moving up ceremony will be Thursday, June 17th. That's a big deal, at 10 a.m. in Reynolds Field. And the grade 8 recognition night is Thursday, June 17th, another one of our premier events. It's very exciting. That's at 6 p.m., also at Reynolds Field, and there's a rain date if the weather doesn't cooperate with us. So thank you very much, and those are the announcements that I have.
Maureen and Melissa, are there administrative comments this evening, or just the presentations or discussions later on?
Yeah, I think it was just the presentations. The only thing I want to just update for anyone who's listening is that in addition to the American Rescue Plan, Melissa will also be applying for June 15th, the other grant. So, the feedback sessions were helpful also because some of the things that may not be falling into one into the American Rescue Plan, there's also an opportunity to fund some of those items through the Coronavirus Response Act.
And no administrative comments from me this evening. Thank you.
I just want to say before we go on that the board wishes to honor former district employee and Hastings resident Ellen Woods, who passed away on June 4th after a courageous battle with breast cancer. She served as well as the facilities office secretary, and we wish her family and loved ones our condolences. We don't have the student trustees present with us tonight. This is now the public comment portion of the meeting. This would be an opportunity for the public to make comment on any item within the board's agenda this evening. If there's any member here of the community that would like to speak on items on our agenda, if you could please go up to the podium. You have 3 minutes. If you could please state your name and if you're a resident of Hastings.
Resident of Hastings. I just have a comment about the mask wearing outdoors. And, I'm concerned when I hear things like we're going to send a survey out to ask the parents and the administrators and people what they think, because we did that for the barriers, and the overwhelming information was that people don't want barriers anymore, and yet we still have barriers, even though the science actually shows that the barriers actually cause transmission instead of decreasing it. Okay, so we're not following the science there. Whereas the science clearly states that it is not transmitted outdoors, not to children, not from children, not to adults, not from adults. The science has proven that. We found that out. We know that now. However, heat exhaustion and passing out when it's 90 degrees because you're wearing a mask and you can't breathe is real. And I don't think that that's something we want our children to face. So I think that if we're going to ask a survey, I ask you to please follow the survey and follow what the people of our community are asking for, instead of doing it as sort of a public face, but then choosing to do whatever you decide to do instead. I don't think there's any reason why the children should wear masks outdoors anymore. As I said, science proves that they don't need to. Thank you.
I don't see any other additional members of the community coming up for public comments, so we're going to move on in the agenda. We have business items 1 through 15. Are there any comments or questions from the board regarding these business items?
I just had I was wondering if, Melissa, you could maybe just talk a little bit about the Racial Equity Day at Hillside?
Sure. So the CARES Committee at Hillside, along with Janice Mateo Toledo, have been working on a Racial Equity Day, specifically at Hillside, too. So there was one that occurred at Hastings High School, followed by one at Farragut Middle School, and this one's specific to the elementary school. And there will be a presentation, and the agenda item that's on as a business item today is covered under the Hastings Education Foundation grant for the speaker. And it is specifically Dame Tenzing, who is, he's a Sherpa. And so he's coming in via Zoom, and there's a presentation that's been created that I know the building level has reviewed and been a part of, and wanting to make sure that it's developmentally appropriate for our youngest learners. So talking about what a Sherpa is, talking a little bit about the historical context, thinking a little bit about the climate conditions, actually, of the Himalayas, and tying that in to pieces around diversity, specifically related to Sherpas.
Do you want to just acknowledge that the foundation provided the funding?
I did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
It's okay.
Are there any additional comments or questions regarding business items 1 through 15? Is there a motion to approve business items 1 through 15?
I would move, so moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? We'll move on to personnel. There are 4 appointments, or 3 appointments and some changes to the Schedule B. So it's appointments number 1 through 4. Are there any questions or comments regarding these appointments? Is there a motion to approve appointments 1 through 4?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? There are 2 leaves of absence. Are there any questions or comments about these leaves? Is there a motion to approve the leaves of absence 1 and 2?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? There is 1 retirement. Are there any questions or comments about this retirement? Is there a motion to approve this 1 retirement?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? The minutes are posted for the Board of Education meeting for May 25th, 2021. Are there any questions or comments about these minutes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes for May 25th, 2021?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? So we'll move on now to the construction project update. And so we can proceed with the construction project update, and then we can have the policy second read. And then after that point, it's not in the agenda, but if any board member wants to comment on the presentation regarding the federal funds, we can do that after the policy second read. So Maureen is going to go ahead with the construction project update.
Sure. Thank you, Lauren. So again, similar to the last few weeks, we've been documenting the progress through some photographs here, and they then live on our website. So this covers the progress specifically at Hillside Elementary School for the addition project, and the time frame is basically between our last meeting and today. So as you can see now, they've put the final grade in insulation for the basement slab, and that work was done last week. They've also got the vapor barrier down for the basement slab. So those pictures there document that. Oh, goodness, Patrick, I think I doubled it. So again, after that was done, thank you. Thank you. After that work was completed, that allowed them to pour the basement slab, and as you can see there, that's the finished slab that is on the right-hand side picture and in progress. Okay, sorry. Thank you. Again, there was some, last week they were starting, after doing the foundations, to create the footings for the pergola that's in the front of the Hillside addition, and during that process, they did discover some additional rock there. There's plenty of rock up at Hillside School at the site, and luckily, they were able to chop out the rock, and you'll see that on the left. There was some unforeseen rock in that location, and that came out fairly easily, thank goodness. And on the right hand there, you see that they continue to excavate and install the sub-base for the pergola footings, which is actually getting in preparation also for the steel that'll be coming in the next few weeks. Okay, thank you. Again, and it's great to kind of see these photographs as things are taking form. We see on the left the form work that's created in order to allow for the retaining walls then to be put in. And again, they started to create the walkway, which will be going around, connecting the back of the building and the exit at the back of the building around, there'll be a walkway that goes around the entire addition. Again, that's needed for egress. And on the right there, we see the material for the pipe delivery for the roofing, because the gas pipe, in order to connect to the existing service, will run across the top of from the existing building to the new portion of the building, and we see here that being delivered. I think it's posted on. And again, you can see there, that's a shot from the roof where they're starting to continue that gas pipe insulation over the existing building to connect into the addition, which again was helpful that we didn't require to get a new service from Con Edison, because that is tricky. I think that's it. That's the update for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Are there any questions or comments from board members about the progress at Hillside?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
I don't know if you mentioned this and I missed it, but is there any issue with having that pipeline over the building?
No, and that was the decision when it was designed. That seemed to be working with both groups of architects and engineers. That was the way they felt it was the best way to bring the service over to the new addition. So I guess once they got into the underground and things like that, they just, again, it wasn't so much even a cost, it was actually something that that both architects and engineers felt was the correct way to bring in the new service. Of course, it'll be protected, but.
Got it. It's fine if there's a hurricane or something like that?
Yes. I know. You do worry about that. I think, again, you all tend to think, as we see with wires being down, that when you can get them underground, but again, that was the decision at the time, and they felt that was the best way to address bringing over the connection there. But I'll just confirm with them what the protection is for that pipe.
Thank you, Maureen.
You're welcome.
We have the second read of policies. There are 5 policies that are attached to the agenda, and again, these are policies that have had adjustment as part of the year-long project of the audit of our entire policy manual that we've received guidance from NISBA and our council to update. So this is an opportunity. I believe last time we talked a bit about policy 3230, the organizational chart, and just some sort of description about the connecting lines and what those mean. And there is language that's added in the additional policies that follow it. So I don't know if board members have additional questions or comments regarding this second opportunity to look at the adjustments to these policies.
I think the one thing that's a little bit confusing still about the org chart, and I see what you're trying to accomplish on an 8.5 and 11 sheet of paper, is just the relationship between the assistant sup and principals, and I see the dotted line is essentially implying kind of direct report to the super, correct? Of principals, director of special ed, director of phys ed, and school counseling, with that matrix, that dotted line from the assistant sup. But I wonder, and I didn't have a chance to read the ensuing policies, but does it lay out what those actually mean, that solid and dotted lines? Because I can imagine it can get a little bit confusing at times, and I don't know if Valerie, you may have some thoughts or opinions on that as well, but I'm just curious how that works in kind of in practice on a kind of month-to-month, day-to-day basis.
Sure. The dotted line in the construction of this organizational chart, which is a practice that's gone back for as long as B. Goodman's been here, and updating the various organizational charts. The dotted line means that there's supervision responsibilities. So the superintendent and the assistant superintendent supervise the principals and directors and assistant principals. The teachers, general education teachers report directly to the principals. Of course, the principal determines how to distribute the supervision responsibilities with regards to teacher observations and other observations that take place and other responsibilities at the building level. The director and assistant director of special education partner with the building principal and assistant principal to provide the oversight as it pertains to special educators. What we were going to do, which is what you mentioned, and this may be in the hands of legal counsel right now, policy 3240, which should delineate the line responsibility for right now, only has a description that states that teachers shall be immediately responsible to the principal of the building in which they work, and other employees shall be immediately responsible to the administrative personnel. So what we decided to do after the first read was to provide more language, so that all of so that the entire organizational chart is explained in policy 3240. So Melissa might already be able to update us on the progress of that.
So there is request to council about a narrative that could accompany the visual of the organizational chart, so that is currently in process.
Okay. Just because, for example, director of curriculum, I'm imagining would have had a different relationship than an assistant superintendent
Absolutely.
of curriculum. And if we've got people in the system who have gotten used to that role, I think it's really important to explicate that very clearly.
I agree.
So
And we'll do that.
I don't know. I personally feel more comfortable voting on both of them together in tandem rather than, so that's just my personal.
We could do that. We can pull 3230 and add it to the next agenda when we have the narrative under 3240.
Okay, that makes sense.
Which two?
George.
Can I ask either Melissa or Valerie to talk a little about where department chairs fall in here? I know in some schools, department chairs might report to the assistant sup, but also the principal. But we have it structured this way where they report just to the assistant sup. I'm just wondering your thoughts about that. Are there benefits to reporting to both? Does that just complicate matters? Does it help with evaluating if that were eventually, if they did move under that leadership so that they could go into their departments, the teachers' classrooms in their department to help with those evaluations, or just wondering your thoughts on that?
So just from an evaluative standpoint, that's something that I collaborate directly with the building leaders with. So I have, in terms of my personal processes, I work together and block out time, and we complete those evaluations together. If there are things that are happening with the department chairpersons that are specific to different buildings from a supervisory perspective, I'll often initiate a partnership with whomever the building leadership team is, just so that we can, that we're working collaboratively to make sure things are happening. I do believe that under the old org chart, there might have been a shared responsibility. I think this is this is clean in terms of flow of supervision, but just, as a matter of how I prefer to work and how our system has worked, we do engage collaboratively to make sure that we're all working together to move goals forward.
I see. So the department chairs are able to go in for an evaluation of teachers.
Oh, in terms of them. So no, they do not evaluate teachers. So that they are under the annual professional performance review process, that is not part of something that they would be doing. So what they can do in terms of like collegial opportunities for instructional leadership, so to serve as a leader with their colleagues, that's a little bit different, but they do not have an evaluative shoulder, so to speak. They have more of a supportive role when it comes to some of those instructional pieces with their teacher colleagues.
And if there were to be a change in that structure, it would have to be negotiated with the Teachers Association.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to share also, there was a misstatement earlier, an unintentional likely misstatement earlier that the proposal to move the diversity and inclusion coordinator to 1.0 would be a new administrative role. And in fact, you can see on the organization chart that it is not an administrative role, that it's a teacher position. That we're not, that the proposal is not to elevate the type of role they have in the district, but rather to make their teaching position full-time in that role. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Do they get paid on the teacher pay scale, or do they get paid on the administrative pay scale?
They would be on the teacher scale.
So there are actually three policies that are tied together to this organizational chart. It's 3230, 3200, and 3240. Is that correct? I believe there are three. So perhaps we can pull those three out to not vote on this evening, but as this is the second read, I want to see if there's a motion to approve policy 1000, 1120, 1222, and 8130.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? And thank you for following through with the recommendations. So we anticipate seeing those policies again, 3230, 3200, and 3240 with an update with potential to approve at the next board meeting. So at this point, board members, we've had an opportunity to share our thoughts and comments regarding the American Rescue Act funds at prior board meetings, but we didn't have the opportunity to share any thoughts or comments regarding the feedback collected both from the community-wide committee and survey. So are there any additional comments or thoughts that board members want to share regarding the proposal that came forward tonight?
I just want to throw out a few comments that I think people are much closer than they realize in how to use this money. It's not a huge amount of money. There are going to be other, I think, many efforts to help kids once they return. But in terms of helping with learning loss or remediation, there are many efforts that I think were generated by teachers who are also boots on the ground, you know, just as parents were. And a lot of what parents wanted, I think teachers felt the same. And to me, I see that reflected in these recommendations. I see their recommendations also to help social-emotional learning in several areas. And in my mind, the increase in the diversity and inclusion coordinator is related to that social-emotional learning. And that my understanding is that that work is intended to build compassion, to build understanding of one another, which is all part of the loneliness and separation and removal that a lot of kids have felt over COVID. I think there are definite tie-ins there, that some kids probably experience regularly for other reasons. So to me, that comes together. The one thing that we could talk about further, these are 2-year positions, and I think this evaluative process was started and when Melissa, you presented sort of the goals for the inclusion coordinator, but maybe there will be some fleshing out of that. The same for the math interventionist. What are our goals for those 2 years, and how do we assess if they're meeting those goals? Do Hillside teachers feel that the math interventionist was a good expenditure, and what are they basing that on? That's a good step to know, is this something to keep or not? I know that with the diversity and inclusion coordinator, that Janice is working to build teacher capacity in her role in understanding all of these issues and how to discuss them. So, she would be taking on some of those trainings, and then we could, that's something that could be assessed again. But in the meantime, the state is requiring more diversity work, more ethics and civics work, and that is very much tied to improving kids' emotional health. So just back to my original point, I think that these funds are being allocated in ways that teachers really support, and there are always going to be some outliers and some discussion, but I think it's really hitting on the areas that need the most help for these funds. There will be additional ways that we can continue to work on other problems, but I think this is a good start for $257,000.
Are you able just to remind us, Melissa, of how the other funds can be used?
Sure.
That 1 point.
Do you have it? Okay. So I think we're looking at the same document. Yeah. So there are 20 allowable uses. And in case anyone in the public is listening, the Google form that just went out for input actually has a link to those. And the first is any activity authorized by the ESEA, including the Native Hawaiian Education Act and the Alaska Native Educational Equity Support and Assistance Act. The second, any activity authorized by IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The third, any activity authorized by the Adult Education and Family Literacy Act. The fourth, any activity authorized by the Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Act of 2006. The fifth, any activity authorized by Subtitle B of Title VII of the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. The sixth, coordinating preparedness and response efforts of LEAs with state, local, tribal, and territorial public health departments and other relevant agencies to improve coordinated responses among such entities to prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID-19. 7, providing principals and other school leaders with the resources necessary to address the needs of their individual schools. 8, activities to address the unique needs of low-income children or students with disabilities, English learners, racial and ethnic minorities, students experiencing homelessness, and children and youth in foster care, including how outreach and service delivery will meet the needs of each population. 9, developing and implementing procedures and systems to improve the preparedness and response efforts of LEAs, that's local education agencies. 10, training and professional development for staff of the LEA on sanitation and minimizing the spread of infectious disease. 11, purchasing supplies to sanitize and clean the facilities of the LEA, including buildings operated by such LEA. 12, planning for, coordinating, and implementing activities during long-term closures, including providing meals to eligible students, providing technology for online learning to all students, providing guidance for carrying out requirements under the IDEA, and ensuring other education services can continue to be provided consistent with all federal, state, and local requirements. 13, is around educational technology purchases, including hardware, software, and connectivity for students who are served by the LEA that aids in regular and substantive educational interaction between students and their classroom instructors, including low-income students and students with disabilities, which may include assistive technology or adaptive equipment. 14, providing mental health services and supports, including through the implementation of evidence-based full-service community schools. 15, planning and implementing activities related to summer learning and enrichment and supplemental after-school programs, including providing classroom instruction or online learning during the summer months and addressing the needs of low-income students, students with disabilities, English learners, migrant students, students experiencing homelessness, and children and youth in foster care. 16, addressing the academic impact of lost instructional time among an LEA's students, including low-income students, students with disabilities, English learners, racial and ethnic minorities, students experiencing homelessness, and children and youth in foster care, included by, and the first is around administering and using high-quality assessments that are valid and reliable to assess academic progress and assist educators in meeting academic needs, including differentiated instruction. B, implementing evidence-based activities to meet the comprehensive needs of students. C, providing information and assistance to parents and families on how they can effectively support students, including in a distance learning environment. D, tracking student attendance and improving student engagement in distance education. 17 is around school facility repairs and improvements to enable operation of the schools to reduce the risk of virus transmission and exposure to environmental health hazards and to support student health needs. 18 is around inspection, testing, maintenance, repair, replacement, and upgrade projects to improve indoor air quality, including mechanical and non-mechanical heating and ventilation and air conditioning systems, filtering, purification, and other air cleaning, fans, control systems, and window and door repair and replacement. 19, developing strategies and implementing public health protocols, including, to the greatest extent practicable, policies in line with guidance from the CDC for reopening and operation of school facilities to effectively maintain health and safety for students, educators, and other staff. And then finally, other activities that are necessary to maintain the operation of and continuity of services in the LEA, and continuing to employ existing staff of the LEA in determining how to prioritize its funds. And so really thinking about reopening for full-time instruction, maintaining safe in-person operations, advancing educational equity, and building capacity. So that's really the overview of that last one.
And that's for the Coronavirus Response Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act?
That's right.
Okay.
And it dates back to March 2020, so they gave us
Right.
the allocation now, but it can.
It's retrospective.
Right, so we can put through some of, if we chose to do so, like recoup some of the funds we spent on some of
So the
those efforts.
257 of the ARP is over 2 years, and the 1.586 of the CRRSA is over how many years?
It's
Is it-
like 1.5, because I think it only goes, it doesn't, it's not quite a fiscal year, it's a little bit more than a fiscal year, so it's like a year and a few months. So it does cover next summer though as well. So I
Okay.
believe it's like July 1 through,
And can
right
you
now,
read-
I
it
believe,
was like-
I believe it'll be expanded, but as of right now, it takes us through.
So number 15 or 16 or something, there was something evidence-based, something for comprehensive. It sounded like kind of a catch-all.
A lot of it is.
That would, like, the end was the ultimate catch-all.
Right.
Except for the LEA, I just wasn't quite sure
Yeah.
what that qualified, but.
Yeah.
But it seems like there were also major provisions, given the commentary that we heard, and
Yeah.
just like
Yeah. Even
things that
number
people reached
7.
out to us about in terms of really having specific concerns around mental health and
Right.
learning loss. It seems like those are two very major categories for which, although we don't know what the outcome will be in terms of the $257,000 we have proposals that have been put forth, there's this, that is just one chunk of money in this 1.57, whatever it is, to give us another opportunity in which we could actually, perhaps.
And that's a pretty big Venn diagram crossover of what you can use these things for.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
I mean, number 7, I mean, that alone, providing principals and other school leaders with resources necessary to address the needs of their individual schools. I mean,
They're very
right
broad
there
strokes.
gives you
They're very
coverage.
broad
Very
strokes.
purposefully.
If you can't find a lawyer who can find a rationale
That's
for
the
it.
number 7 that is fairly.
Well,
What my colleagues and I across the region have found is, that when they give you the opportunities for these grants, when we apply for them, we have to be very specific. And this is an area where the state does look very closely, and they make sure that things match. And if they have any questions, they ask the questions, and they give you opportunities to revise if necessary. But they do try to keep things specific enough, but also not hamper the ability to be able to best support children, which is great. They give you some guidance of how you can look to be using the funding sources.
Well, I think this
And
one
to
was
tailor
broader.
it specifically to the needs of your particular community.
Right.
It's so variable across New York State.
Right.
So. And what is the deadline by which we have to have the plan submitted regarding this fund?
Well, for the ARP funds, it's July 1.
Right, I'm talking about for the
CRRSA is June 15th. I did apply for an extension on behalf of our district. Like, you know, like. Yeah, it's July 15th. They've extended 1 month for us. They did accept the request for an extension.
So
because
August
it,
15th, or we're
July 15th is now the new date. It is a sizable sum,
Right.
so we want to make sure we engage thoughtfully.
I mean, I'm supportive of the proposals that you've put forth so far. I mean, I've shared this before. I don't have to go into details now. I've shared it in previous meetings. I will share that I personally, I think education is very hard because I think with something I've heard forever is once you put something in a budget, it's there forever and you can't get it out. So I want to say here publicly that I really support the making diversity inclusion 0.6 to 1.0. And I want us to be really diligent about being clear about that role, the impact, the expectations. And I really want the board to be brought in the loop, whatever the appropriate amount of time is that you'll let us know, but a couple times a year so that we can really understand how that money's being allocated, because at some point we're going to have to make a decision for that to go into an operating budget. And I will say right now that if I don't see that narrative and that storyline and that evidence, that it's beyond bringing in programs or frameworks, but it's really about significant capacity building for the system. And some of that, quite frankly, is going to have to be, really getting feedback from people in the system and the teachers, the administrators. And I think change is hard, and I think there will be, obviously challenges with some of those changes and bringing some of this stuff in. So this is it's not an easy ask, and I think we've been largely at the forefront of doing a lot of the thinking programmatically. Now I hope we're going to be at the forefront in really thoughtful, integrated capacity building, again, moving beyond programs into actually integrated learning strategies, development strategies for our K-12 staff, teaching staff. I think the best way to do that is to have someone who can dedicate their time to doing that. I think if we ask for that and we ask someone to run with, a leg tied up, or, what are we asking them to do? Let's give them a fair shot. Let's give Janice a fair shot. She's certainly got the background, the history in the district, and then let's stay honest as a board, is what I would say, to looking at that. And ask you to really, a lot will be on you, right, as the assistant soup of curriculum, to really help craft that story with teachers and Janice and everyone. So I'm supportive of the allocation of funds, so thank you.
So I want to just follow up on that, Doug, because I think you all know that I'm supportive of that. My only caution to what you're saying is that I do think we have to look carefully as it will become part of the overall ongoing budget. But when you say that we should be getting feedback, and we're talking about something over 2 years, I say this out of my own experience, you're going to get a lot of pushback also. So you're going to hear negative stuff. I mean, there's just no way that this position isn't going to come with a lot of pushback. And I think as the board, you need to really think about how you're going to think about and look at what Janice does. Otherwise, you're going to have people coming to board meetings, to every board meeting, giving you public comment about why this position shouldn't be, and you'll have petitions, and you all know what it will be. And I think you have to really think about and really, I think, yes, I think Melissa will be really key in your understanding of how the position has been implemented and continued to really get woven into the thread, a lot of threads in the district. But I just caution you about the feedback piece. I mean, obviously, you got to know if it's a good thing or not, and I think you have to think about what that means and how you get that. But this does not come easily, and it comes with a huge amount of pushback.
Yeah, I think it has to be critically reflected upon, you know, I mean, when it comes down to it, we're at a point, whether it's diversity and inclusion, whether it's the future of work for the children, and I mean, we are in a time of change. I mean, you know, Valerie, I think, really kicked us off well last year, doing a lot of reading and critically reflecting on the future of education. You know, obviously, we didn't do a lot of that as we went into firefighting mode around coronavirus, but you know, that work, and this is one part of that. Diversity and inclusion is one part of that work. You know, we haven't had an assistant superintendent of curriculum. You're blazing that trail in a bizarre time during COVID. You know, it's like every 6 months is another bizarre time, and you know, at some point, you can't kind of say, well, let's wait. And let's wait until the next group comes. I've been here for 5 years. I've been waiting for the next group for 5 years. It never stops. And then my kids will be graduated, and all of our kids will be graduated. And we got to go. Here's what we have to do. This is why we're doing this work. And if something screws up, it screws up, and we have to talk about it. And we have to be honest about it. And you know, sweeping stuff under the rug just doesn't work. And waiting for perfection doesn't work either. You know, my favorite expression has been, and people on the board know this, is the knight in shining armor is not coming, right? There's just no one right around the corner. And we have to do the work. And that work, you take a few punches to the gut, to the face, and you keep doing the work. And, you know, you hope you're further along. And I think we will be. But it's not going to be easy. And we're going to have to discern critical feedback from just noise in the system and figure out where the signals are, where the noise is. But we have to get going. I think Janice is the person to help us start on that path and take it from there. So that's my personal opinion. Obviously, other people might have other opinions on the board, but that's my personal opinion.
I want to share that I think this $257,000 is a real gift. And I really appreciate the time that you, Melissa, and Maureen, and Valerie, and the committee, and all the participants of the survey put into giving us the feedback. I think I also agree that I'm supportive of the proposals for this particular money. And as it's become a touch point of discussion, I just want to say that I think that the diversity, equity, and inclusion position is a component of the social and emotional health of students, in particular for students of color, and it's about the social and emotional development for white children. I think everyone in the community will benefit from having a teacher dedicated to supporting the system on these issues within our curriculum and within our school culture. I just hope that we can think more broadly when the additional federal money is being discussed, because I feel like there's this sort of discourse on sort of direct implementation to students of service, of maybe like clinical service or counseling service, whereas real rich, engaging play programs, social learning programs, problem-solving programs are really related to the betterment of children, and that research shows that peer-to-peer contact within constructive environments is really the way to help students develop real resilience and real community attachment and re-engagement with school. So I hope that, you know, I will not be part of the board discussion if there is one after June on the allocation of that funding. So I just want to voice now that I hope board members will keep that idea in mind, that it's not necessarily direct service to students, but it's real enriching programs for children, K through 12, that will provide them the type of cognitive and mental health benefits that will really resonate for years to come.
I'd just piggyback on that by saying a lot of the research shows in middle and high school that the real social emotional learning comes when kids can relate to the stories that they're learning. So, you know, a lot of this work does lend itself to history, English, even science, as ways for kids to connect to people who are different from them. Or even, you know, the misfits, somebody who's sort of like you but sort of different. So I think a lot of us have that hope that eventually this becomes just part of learning, and it's more effective than a one-off speaker when it's really incorporated into your everyday learning in a tangible way.
Are there any additional thoughts on American Rescue Plan Sunday?
Yeah, in general, I'll repeat my thoughts from 2 weeks ago, which are in the minutes, as speaking disapprovingly of the 3 suggestions that are coming forward. In general, I feel it's a pretty rushed timeline. We have 1 month, and a lot of these surveys are being sent out to people who aren't in there. So we are always, as a board, waiting to hear administrators make choices and bring it to us. These choices, unfortunately for me, are ones that I find uninspiring, but I can count and I can see that that's not the case for any administrator who's bringing their selections forward. They're hearing plenty of supportive voices. The way these funds are being spent are ways that I don't, in general, support. I'm looking at a school district that is doing everything under the eyes of progress. Everything new is progress, and it's too much. I want no new initiatives in the classrooms, no new initiatives for our principals. Our principals moving forward are looking at exactly what's in the past. New administrators, new initiatives, new superintendents. We are getting an interim superintendent from 1 year and then another new superintendent. So I look at our district and I look at these suggestions and it's too much. We've added an inclusive coordinator. We've gone from 0.2 to 0.6 and had no way to evaluate it this year. There's no feedback because we don't know what 0.6 gave us. We are getting a new principal in FMS, a newish principal at Hillside. Got Melissa's position is new, and we're heading towards more and more change over at superintendents. If ever there could be ways to spend this funds simpler, get it towards the students. As much can claw back because our community talks to me and they are close to voting no on their first ever budgets. The number of neighbors who come to me and say, I am close to voting no. So it's just more and more proposals of spending. The first budgets were 4.5% growth, now it's down to 2.5% growth. They're gonna start voting no. And they hear this growth as stuff that's being pushed in. You just said it, it's probably never gonna come out. We probably don't vote on it, is what most of our assumptions are. This is not even something that the board's gonna vote on. Administrators make choices, and we vote in different ways on other ways. There is so much change. This idea that if you're not moving forward, you're not making progress is not one that I agree with. If you change the tires at the same time you change the engine, at the same time you change the body, you can't evaluate anything. We have principals who also need to get control of their buildings. I do not support, for a variety of reasons, or I do believe in what I hear as concerns. Inclusive schooling, evaluating it in Hillside, it's not free money. It has negatives. Increasing the DEI position from 0.6 to 1.0 has negative effects. This money is going to stay here forever. It's difficult. I appreciate all the effort, Maureen has said it many times, there's some ways we can go back to March 20th. In that sense, it is free money. Money we already decided to spend. Of course, we'd love to hear that all of it could be clawed back. And then we'd be free to spend our money on a better timeline instead of within 1 month to decide. Obviously, it probably can't all be retroactively pulled back, and moving forward, how much of it can be applied to our current budget needs already. But if you want to talk about supporting students, 6th grade, send them over to Liberty Science School. See how much of that can be just put in, $100 per kid going to awesome museums in New York City. Other school districts have gone to Kill a Mockingbird when it was on Broadway. These monies sound so general. We could give 1,600 students some amazing experiences, and it would end if the grants don't come. So administrators make the choices, but this is the same exact proposals that we've heard for the last month. The administrators I'm looking at are working more hours than I'm sure are in their contract and trying to juggle as much as possible. I continue to support your efforts, and if these are the only proposals that are going to be brought to discuss and there is no vote coming forward before it's got to be finalized, then these are the proposals our administration has chosen. It's not necessarily a role of the board to nitpick on what's going to be here, but our budget is growing, our community is paying, and this sort of growth is one that has a lot of negatives. It's not just going to be noise. We are changing a lot in our district right now. And if I could see 2 years where I promised, not me, sorry, if it could be promised to Amy, to Jennifer, and Lou that they would have 2 years to regroup in their buildings, there would be so much growth from letting principals and teachers run their classrooms without having what is a very unpopular with teachers and somewhat unpopular with residents proposals. There has to be other ways we can spend this money that helps the budget, that helps the community, that helps the students. 2 of those 3 areas, as you guys know, I am disappointed to see that we are going to be pushing forward on.
So the math interventionist and things like that, that teachers have identified as a way to help with learning loss, that's not appealing. I mean, I know it's not racy, but
I've been running on the expectation that 20% of the money had to be spent on learning loss, and 20% was a quick $50,000. That sounded like the math specialist. That math just sounded it was out the door. We were only talking about 200 grand here. How much money we could claw back was Maureen pulling magic strings and budget items. How much was it was actually to give relief to communities who stepped up in a time of crisis. Nobody pushed back on our budgets. Our budgets passed. They said, what do we have to spend to take care of our students? What do we have to spend to create a safe environment for our staff and teachers? So after the math specialist, I believe, is where we have community support and community pushback. But not the math specialist sounded like, to me, like, hey, we got to spend 50 grand on a teacher position, let's do it. Everything else, I would be more excited about hearing stuff that social, emotional learning experiences, relaxation. We have so many people in our community whose job is inclusion, whose job is equity, whose job is diversity. I don't see the purpose of growing that when that's the job of an AP, a principal, a director of curriculum, a superintendent, and every teacher's goal is to make our classes better and better. If it's 100 grand a year, the math, if it's 50 grand going to Hillside math specialist, it's 100 grand a year. There's a lot of ways you could spend that, which is ways that kids will remember, whether you call it mental health or you call it what it is. You send kids to their first Broadway play with that money, and I don't know which of the 20 could do it or how you reword it. That's a memory they're going to remember more than some other ways, and certainly not that inclusion school. Bringing in consultants, of course, that's not directed in a short-term way for the students. Administrators make decisions. Board members usually just raise their hand and say aye. So if that's where it's coming, it's going to be supported. You guys work the hours, and we put in 2 hours a month. It's not where I would see schools going forward.
I guess my thought on the position, at least I'm speaking specifically with respect to the diversity coordinator position, and it being expanded over the next 2 years, is that I really do see it as a 2-year position. I mean, and in some ways, I don't mean this to come off in any way as being light, but I do see it as an opportunity to see what can be done in that position. I think people realize that at the last meeting, I wasn't in favor of incorporating that into our operating budget, because I don't think that I don't think that enough has changed from the previous year to say that I would feel comfortable bumping that up. It's because these funds that have a 2-year term to them were basically made available to us as a district that I would, and I understand I don't have a vote on this, I'm just providing my own commentary, why I do think that it might be a 2-year position. It might be that at the conclusion of the 2 years, the board, whoever that happens to be at that point in time, doesn't see that it's a position that should be at a full-time, And I say that only because I know, having had children who've gone through the middle school, we once upon a time had a literacy coach, we once upon a time had a math coach, and we don't have those positions. So it's not that something that once it comes in is forever. I do think that, any type of additional responsibilities which are allocated to that position actually have to be borne out by achievements that can be captured. And that is because I think, when you're talking about a sum like $257,000 and more than a third of that is being allocated to one position, it's natural for people to question the proportionality of that. That's just human nature. And I do think that, we owe it in terms of accountability to our populace, whether it's the taxpayer, our parent population, and to the students, to really bear out what is the fruit of the labor of this new position. Because it's not something like a position that's already been around and that, we realize we need 2 math interventionists. It's something that, is really kind of innovative and exciting, but also means that, at least in my estimation, is one that needs to be aligned with achievements. And again, that's not meant to be said in any type of way that's disrespectful of the merit of the work. I obviously think it's very important and spoke to that point, and I wouldn't want any member of the public to interpret that as a slight to the work on behalf of not only students of color, because I think many people oftentimes say, well, this is just for those students. And I personally take affront at that, because it isn't just for my kids. I do think it's work that is supposed to be impactful for all students. But the other side of that coin is that when you're going to do something like that and you're spending the public's money, you need to say why you're doing it. And so I actually agree with a lot of the things that Jeremy had to say. Maybe not necessarily the tone, but I agree with the innate skepticism of spending money up. That's just kind of not in my nature. And I will say it, personally, I only feel, and I understand that it's only a 2-year funding source, but it would be, I can't anticipate what the folks who are going to be board members at that time what determination they'll reach, but I don't think that anybody should see this as like a forever and ever position. It's a position that we're trying to figure out. And I do think that I laud those board members, especially those around this table who've been here for a long time and who, when I was not a member of this board, really stepped up to say we do approve of incorporating courageous conversations and things of that nature, and how that's kind of grown over time. But that's kind of a little bit of a rambling speech, but I'm just trying to say that I know that I'm not voting on this. I just kind of wanted to explain where I stand, and I do think that the fact that it's finite funds makes it different for me, and particularly with respect to that particular position. So.
I think part of the reason why I feel this is in part a gift is because sort of concurrent to this money becoming available through the grant, the New York State Regents have new recommendations or requirements regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion work, as well as civics work So I think that, sort of capturing this opportunity within that larger educational context, it appears much more as a gift to give us this opportunity as our district really has been committed over time to incrementally having this work influence our system K through 12. I think that we really do have this opportunity here within that overall environment. And the changes that are occurring throughout education, I agree, Jeremy, they're daunting. But I think a lot of people, I'm very close to a lot of educators, whether it's in higher ed or K through 12, and a lot of folks are feeling that, that things weren't working well pre-COVID, and here's an opportunity to really make things different. That time sort of stood still for a moment, and yet we had to keep moving. And I think that to return to how things were is a false mentality. I don't think it can happen, and I think there are many educators who are interested to see, or forced to see how things could be different, and now are eager to make things different for their students. We have the second public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone in the community to make a comment regarding any district business. Please state your name, and if you're a resident of Hastings, and if you could limit your comments at this period to 2 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Ito. I'm a Hastings resident. I have a child in Hillside. He's in 4th grade. I just want to thank you all for all the work that you're doing. This is incredible. I haven't come to enough board meetings to fully appreciate the amount of time you guys put in. This has been a crazy year, and I've been reflecting a lot on being an Asian person growing up in a mostly white society. I grew up in Canada. It was pretty much the same for me. And I was thinking it's been 40 some odd years. Have things changed in 40 years? In a recent article in the Hastings, in the high school buzzer, made by Katie Cho, made me think things really haven't changed. And then we had a president who was saying Kung Flu, and if it's related or not, some people debate, but there's been a large spike in anti-Asian sentiment and anti-Asian violence, and that has been terrifying for me. So I think, and that was a direct result of the pandemic. I don't think there's any denying that. So in light of that, I think that increasing the position of the diversity coordinator to 1.0 will be important. It'll be important for us to figure out what kind of community we want to build, and this is an ideal chance to work towards that. And I think, again, it's like Sylvia was saying, it's not permanent. We can just see where this can take us. We have a chance here. So I want to focus on the word inclusion, and I know, there's a lot of catchphrases these days, but I would like to think that the isolation and the strangeness of all this online learning has led to a lot of these academic difficulties and socio-emotional troubles that we're seeing in our children today. But if we broaden our understanding of other people's experiences and not just focus on our own, and we expand it to include a lot of other people's experiences and help us to relate to one another in more meaningful ways, we can create a community where no one feels left out. And if we can create that kind of inclusive community, we won't let any child, or any family for that matter, fall through the cracks. So in terms of socio-emotional health, I think that if we're talking about studies, I think that there have been a lot of studies that have come out recently showing that the most important thing for a person, for for their mental health long-term is social connectedness. It doesn't matter what you have, it doesn't matter what school you went to, it's the people around you and how you can relate to each other. So I really feel that, I just want to reiterate, I think we have a real opportunity here. You know, it's like in this umbrella of the American Rescue Plan, but I feel like this is a chance, like what kind of society do we want to build? What kind of children do we want to send out and start their own families, and what kind of communities are they going to build? So I just, you know, want us to think.
Hi, can you wrap it up? Your time is up. Thank you.
So I just want us to think bigger than just this moment. And I think this is a real chance for us.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you for that very thoughtful and positive message. I think the positive spirit of what you just said is maybe the type of thing we want to focus on. There's a notable difference between what you just said and referring to community feedback as noise in the system or noise in the machine. I don't think anybody should be thought of as noise, to be ignored or belittled. Thank you.
Thanks again. I say my name again. Two things. One, I'm a little dismayed that in this conversation we had about how to spend the money, there was really very little discussion about learning loss and how to help with that. And two, regarding the DEI position, I think one of the problems with the DEI position is that people, as clearly stated in our community right now with the other lady that spoke next to Jen, that people think that the DEI position is about LGBTQ and religion and other types. It's focused solely on race. And I don't think people in our community understand that. And if it was, you know, I think we need to, when we think about how we want to broaden this position, if it is going to be broadened, I think it's clear that people in our community wish it was about inclusion of all types of people. And I think we should really consider adding that to the job description and broadening the definition of it beyond race. Thank you.
Alex Delpios, of course. I just wanted to add some texture, and I want to thank all of you and everybody who came. This is a very substantive discussion and very welcome discussion. Just some general texture I want to add. Two voices that aren't here and are unlikely to make it. Number one, you know, regarding budget issues. You know, I volunteer in Hastings, often with elderly people, and one of the things that came up often is that they felt like they were getting priced out of Hastings because of their taxes, but also because of the assessment was raising their taxes, you know, was redistributing it to them. And I have no answer to that, but I just think it's something, you know, it pains me a little bit when I hear it. I don't know that we can do much about it, but I would welcome everyone having a little bit of that thought in their mind. And the other thing, the other voice is of the students a little bit, and to what Lori said about, there's not an expectation that there's going to be some sort of clinical intervention, but, you know, just getting kids back together to be kids in the way that kids are kids is incredibly important. And something that the board may not realize, or the district may not realize, is that one of the issues that came up when the classes had their campaigns for class president this week, where some of the people were advocating for clawing back all the opportunities that they missed out on assemblies and outside events and things like that. And those people won, actually. But, you know, it's also, you know, I would like to have that reflected in how these monies get spent, because it's obviously important to the kids. I agree with Lori that it is important even from an adult perspective. And, you know, it would be a little painful for them not to get, you know, to have them be optimistic about it and not get it. You know, it would be a little bit little sad for me. But I just wanted to give those thoughts that you might not otherwise have access to. Thank you.
So we'll conclude the second public comment period. Are there any comments from the Board of Education?
Yeah, I apologize that I missed your comments earlier, Lauren, about Ellen Woods, and I just wanted to take a minute. I was thinking about her during this meeting, I remember when she first came to work here. I remember Maureen, she followed someone, and she had some pretty big shoes to fill in terms of work and personality, and I remember that Ellen just sort of hit the ground running, and she just did what she needed to do to take over and to learn the job and to work with all the people in the school and all the custodians and to have a new bosses along the way. And she was always such, I think felt so sad when I saw how young she was. She was always so just kind and lovely and helping. She would do whatever she would needed to do. I knew her because of rec basketball and scheduling of gyms, and she'd always call in the middle of the day and make sure that you knew everything that was going on, as if that was even part of her job, really, or not even that important. And she was a real fighter. I think she went down fighting, and she was had enormous grace, and she was a gift in many ways. When you're talking about gifts, she was a gift to our district at a time when we needed somebody in that position, and my heart goes out to her family and her kids, and she will really be missed, I think, in Hastings. I know, Sylvia, you also worked closely at times with her.
I did. When I served on the PTSA, she was definitely the go-to person who, if I needed to have anything set up for any type of PTSA meeting, for the BOE forum, anything that involved coordination. She was as,
she didn't bat an eyelash.
Responsive and friendly and helpful as you could hope somebody would be. And I never even met her in person, but she just was the worker bee who made my life very easy. So I'm incredibly appreciative for her, and I know that her loss is sincerely felt, particularly from those folks who had the opportunity to work with her in facilities and throughout the system. So my sincere condolences to her family and to those of you who knew her and worked with her and cared about her. I'm so sorry.
I mean, I know it's more time, but we were talking about Ellen, and she's such a warm laugh, and just her presence was, like, we were thinking about how she was just such a nice person, like you said, and I was saying, it's funny, you remember those things about people, how they made you feel. Like, she always made you feel like she liked you, and she was very kind to everyone, and she has such a large impact on everyone. Like, there was so much sadness in our building, particularly today. A lot of people just couldn't even talk about it. And there were, quite a few staff members, and I said, that's a real testament to just the impact some, people have on others. And she always was, when you called downstairs, she was just such a nice and just that very warm. You remember her laugh? She was very contagious laugh. So she'll be sorely missed for sure.
I'm going to try to be brief, but I never am. There was some sort of Unmask Our Students movement in Westchester, and I just wanted to put a different perspective on it. Whether or not our administration chooses to change the policy for 15 days on outside time, I think, and I'll speak, no one's asking our opinions, I think it might be a nice bone to throw to the kids they could see each other's faces, and I speak that from knowing the staff and teachers are fully vaccinated. But whatever gets decided for those last 15 days, the amount of success with in-person learning this year, either way you guys decide to go, Westchester County and our district in general got so much learning with teachers in front of students this year, and I think it's a huge success. This year, it hurts to read about California and Chicago and New Jersey and Connecticut, and being a part of this administration, because I am not, but getting to share the stage with a school district that got so much in-person learning, more after April, and no one wanted to touch it in December. So as we wrap up the school year, I can tell the 3 kids that I see, or the 30 kids that I see, they had an amazing experience in a horrible year. And whether or not people sometimes overemphasize the wrong things, certainly that Friday blast on our phones was followed up by 25 sincere but quick reactions from parents. Nothing will change. That last 15 days, whatever you guys decide, Westchester succeeded, Hastings succeeded, and there are some students out there in this country who did not get what our small district was able to give to our community. So thank you for ending the year, however you guys do. June 25th, get here as soon as possible. But we had some amazing, after winter kicked our butt. After that, it's really feeling great. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I just want to acknowledge the fact that we're meeting in person, and I had planned on also thanking the administration and the community for doing their part, abiding by public health guidelines, getting vaccinated when it was available, and continuing to get children vaccinated as they become available, because today we're able to meet in person, and it does mean a lot as a board member to see us all together. I feel like we can communicate much more easily together in the same room. So that's because of everything that the community did, nothing that we necessarily did. So I want to thank the community for really doing their part over the past 14, 16, 18 months so that we could be together in the room tonight. Is there a motion to close the Board of Education meeting?
So moved.
And a
Second.
All in favor? I get to do this, but I don't get to do this now.
You look different, Jeremy. Did you get a haircut?
I had a growth spot, like 2 inches.
Stop it.
I don't know what I look like. I don't know what I look like.
Maybe it's the shirt. Maybe it's the shirt.
Oh, or
not
all
a
the board
haircut.
members have to sign.
Every 4 weeks.